to order. Welcome one and all on this snowy April morning. Hopefully it will be our last snowy April morning of 2021. We have two large items on our agenda today. We are getting an update on major developments from Melanie McMahon and from Councilmember Jalali in her role as our council representative on the Community First Public Safety Task Force. Our agenda shows Ms. Jalali presenting first, but I have just given the support staff team that is with that is here to present on major projects. I'm going to take the opportunity to switch the presentation order just so that when we're done with the major projects, the whole major projects crew can get back to work. We'll go on with our business here today. So I'm glad that worked out for folks. At this point, just given that all of these major projects are really kind of born out of our HRA role, I'm going to turn over the facilitation of this part of the conversation to HRA Chair Tolbert.
Great. Thank you very much. And I know we have quite a substantial list of developments before us, so we'll get started. But just for background, these are some of the major development projects that are going on that the city is involved in. And the council and HRA asked for kind of an update on this to see where status is so that we can all be on the same page. I know people who have these projects in their individual ward know very well what's going on, but I think it's good for us all to level set to know what's coming before us. And so with that, Melanie, or Ms. McMahon, welcome to the council, and I'll turn it over to you. And I know you got a substantial slideshow. And you're on mute, I think.
Great. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And Holly has very graciously and kindly agreed to, she's going to be sharing the presentation and going through that. So thank you in advance to Holly, and thank you all for having me. It is really exciting that, to be able to share these updates with you, and that we have so many large redevelopment opportunities in our city. A lot of cities our size might have maybe one, maybe two like this, and we have several. So it's, like I said, great to be able to provide some information and an update for you all. So my goal is to go through each site and start by sharing some background information. Chair Tolbert, to your point of sort of level setting with that, give an update on what the current status is then, and also provide some information about what's coming up next and next steps for each site. So there are, as has been referenced, a lot of people on the line with us who are really subject matter experts in these sites, as well as development partners and owners of these sites, to be able to help answer and facilitate any questions that you might have. So we just want to acknowledge we do have Planning and Economic Development Director Nicole Goodman and several PED staff on the line. We have Mike Solomon from OFS. We also have representatives from Ryan Companies, the St. Paul Port Authority, Ramsey County, and the Capital Area Architecture and Planning Board. So my personal thank you to them all for being here and available today, for helping me in the preparation with this, and for their work on all of these sites in the city. So next slide, please, Holly. I'll start with the Highland Bridge site. For background, this is a former Ford Motor Company assembly plant. It's a 122-acre parcel. Ford Motor Companies ceased production on the site in 2011, and it was followed by a city-led planning process to gather community input on what potential future uses might be for the site. This city council adopted the Ford site zoning and public realm master plan in 2017, and Ryan Companies purchased the site from Ford Land in 2019. Next slide, please. Since that time, there's been a significant amount of work done on the site. So I'll talk about the infrastructure, parks, and the vertical development. Starting with the infrastructure, there's been over 600,000 cubic yards of dirt that's been moved, and over 7.5 miles of utilities that have been installed on the site. There's over a mile of retaining walls that have been poured for that central stormwater system, and the main stormwater filtration system has been installed in the Civic Plaza area, and also Class 5 has been laid down for all Phase 1 roads. For parks, what's really exciting is there will be 4 new city-owned and operated parks on this site. These new parks are in addition to the privately owned public space, such as the Civic Plaza and the Civic Square and that stormwater feature with the walking paths. All 4 of these parks have now been designed through a community process. And I won't steal the thunder of the Parks Department by going into more detail on each of those 4 parks designs at this time, but just to preview that there will be a public open house and Parks Reveal on April 20th. And so you can go to either highlandbridge.com, which is the Ryan Company's website, or the city's Highland Bridge Parks page to get more details on how to sign up for that. The Friends of Highland Ball nonprofit is also now in ownership of the 2 youth ball fields on the north side of Montreal Avenue, which total over an additional 5 acres. On the vertical development front, it's really exciting, if you'll remember from your past council actions on the site, that there will be approximately 3,800 total housing units built out on the site over all of the phases. The land for the first 2 affordable housing developments on the site have been sold to Common Bond Communities and Project for Pride in Living, and they're moving forward, anticipating beginning those developments this year. In addition, Presbyterian Homes will be completing 300 units of senior housing. On Lot 1, Block 3, which is probably may have heard referred to as the Lund site, there will be a Lunds & Byerly's grocery, over 56,000 square feet of retail, and also 230 apartment units. Pulte will be developing row homes on the site. Ultimately, they're going to have about 300 row homes, but they're beginning this summer by building the model row homes to showcase those and let folks see it and preview those that are coming forward. There also are some individual custom home sites that will total just 34 of the housing units for the entire 3,800 on the site. 20 are for sale this year, and the remaining will be for sale in future years. Next slide, please. So some upcoming things for the Highland Bridge site. There are 3 public meetings coming up. I had already referenced that April 20th Parks Open House. I really encourage folks to sign up, and it'll be a great opportunity to see what each of those 4 parks will look like, what the programming will be, and just exciting to see new city parks anywhere in our city. On May 19th, Ryan Companies will be giving a general community update, and then on the 23rd, they'll be hosting a meeting specifically about housing on the site for folks who might be interested in looking at coming to live on the Highland Bridge site. Next slide, please. So this is the Hillcrest development. This site is located on the northeast corner of the city at Larpenteur and McKnight, right across the street from Maplewood, and it operated as a golf course from 1921 to 1917. In 2019, the City Council passed Ordinance 1939, which authorized the issuance and the sale of $10 million of general obligation bonds by the St. Paul Authority to purchase this site. In addition, that ordinance, in addition to granting the authority to issue the bonds, that ordinance passed by the City Council specified that the land sales from the site would pay for the site's development and infrastructure. That ordinance further specified that the Port Authority would deliver to the city 5 acres of active improved parkland, and that they would fund $2.5 million towards those parks improvements, as well as 15 acres of publicly accessible passive open green space on the site. There is a substantial amount of pollution on the site, mostly from fungicides used in the past, and that will require remediation as it moves forward. Next slide, please. So the city is currently leading a master planning process for the site to determine land uses and the transportation layout. You can see those 2 finalist scenarios laid out there. Those have been out for public input. There's been a public meeting on them, and public comment is still actually open for a few more days until April 16th. So encourage folks to go to the city's Hillcrest website, and you can get a lot more information and visuals on exactly what's included in these 2 finalist scenarios. And please, there's a survey, or reach out to you all and let folks know that, now's a great time to chime in while that's still open. The city has conducted an infrastructure analysis looking at water, sewer, stormwater, transportation, and did find that there is adequate infrastructure capacity. That analysis was incorporated into these 2 finalist scenarios that are, like I said, currently out for public input. Next slide, please. So a single land use scenario and a full master plan will be drafted this summer. So that draft master plan will go through the Planning Commission and then to the full City Council for your all review and input and discussion. That process will likely take place in the 4th quarter of this year. And what will ultimately be coming before you on the City Council will be a proposal to amend the code to allow for wider blocks and industrial zones, a proposed ordinance to rezone the site, and a resolution to adopt a master plan. Prior to any development, the site will also need an AUAR, an environmental review, platting, and site plan review. environmental remediation can occur in conjunction with that site preparation, and the Port Authority anticipates that they would develop the industrial parcels themselves and then bring in other partners for the residential and the commercial parcels. Next slide, please. On to Snelling Midway. As the name suggests, right, the site is midway between downtown St. Paul and Minneapolis, bounded by University and 94, Snelling, and Pasco. On the site, there's currently Allianz Field, which opened in April of 2019, which is home to Minnesota United. The site has great access to transit. It's positioned right along the Green Line and University Avenue, as well as the A-Line bus rapid transit service on Snelling Avenue. Sorry. In 2016, there's a master plan adopted by the City Council that specified really where new open space and streets would be. It had maximums for building and scale and things like that. So we do expect that the developer will propose amendments to that master plan. To date, they haven't been submitted, but the city is about to begin work also with a financial consultant to really determine if and at what level any public financing would be needed for the development to occur. And in the coming months, we do expect, like I said, a variety of applications to move the development project forward, which might include things like a master plan amendment. The city staff is working with the development team and the processes that would include the planning commission and city council review to occur when those things are needed. Additionally, further community input would be coordinated with the developer and support from city staff and district council. Future development on the site would be phased, and construction is expected to take place over a period of about 10 years. Next slide, please. The River Center ramp. It's above and adjacent to the River Center, above and adjacent to the River Center parking ramp. It's just across Kellogg Boulevard from the River Center Convention Facility and the Xcel Energy Center. This site is owned by the City of St. Paul, and it sits on the edge of the downtown River Bluff. The ramp was built in about 1970. It is an aging facility, needs either restoration or repair work or to be rebuilt. The HRA was asked by the city to market the site for redevelopment interest to see if a renovation or a full reconstruction of the ramp could be done at the same time as private development. So in the fall of 2019, prior to COVID, what probably seems like a lot longer than that ago, the city did solicit developers to propose ideas for private development, including a long-term solution for the parking ramp. The city received 6 proposals, and city staff reviewed them along with the River Center and a technical consultant. Now, after the COVID pandemic began, it became clear that that would have a significant impact on the types of development that could be likely to occur on the River Center site. So the solicitation for the ramp development was paused in the spring of 2020 to assess the impact of that on the real estate market. Subsequently, last summer, the design of that adjacent Kellogg Bridge project advanced, and Public Works recommended that the bridge project be planned prior to the redevelopment of the River Center ramp in order to minimize conflicts. So due to that market impact of COVID and the sequencing of the bridge project, the city and HRA decided in March to close out the River Center ramp opportunity site solicitation without choosing a developer. The development teams that responded to that solicitation were notified of that decision, and the River Center ramp will continue to operate under the current management agreement with the River Center Authority. An annual maintenance program of repairs will continue to keep the facility operating safely until a major renovation or rebuild of the facility can occur. It is possible that a future solicitation will be issued once the start and the end dates of the Kellogg Bridge project are more solidified, and that design of that bridge can be incorporated into the solicitation. And that would also allow for time for the real estate market to attain more stability and improve the likelihood of success for a developer to complete the project on the site. Next slide, please. The Sears site, it's in the western portion of the Capitol area, and that Capitol area is really unique in that it's under a shared powers board, the Capitol Area Architecture and Planning Board. That board actually has a statutory authority for zoning and design review of the blocks within its boundaries. So the entirety of the Sears site is within the Cap Board jurisdiction, and the Cap Board has its own comprehensive plan, as well as a small area plan for the Sears site and the Capitol Rice District. The Sears building itself was built in 1963, and it closed a little over 2 years ago after that holiday season of 2018-19. Next slide, please. So this is the initial long-range aspirational vision from the owner, which was just released to the Cap Board in March. The goal is to retain the underlying zoning, which is a mixed-use zoning classification, but restore the small block small block pattern that was in place on the site prior to the Sears site being built. So heights are not proposed to exceed the current height limit for the zoning, which is 4 to 6 stories throughout the site. As an aside, if folks are familiar with the Best Western, formerly known as the Kelly Inn on the site, and Department of Transportation building across the street, both of those are about 4 to 7 stories taller than any new building on the Sears site would be. And both of those also predate the cap board. For land uses on the site.
1 second, maybe here,
Yeah.
Commissioner Brenmo, Councilmember Brenmo.
If maybe Ms. McMahon was just about to say this, but I know that we had expressed some concern because the original development on that site was for state office buildings. And there's just a lot of concern that that would mean kind of a exodus of our state office downtown tenants up to this area that we're developing. It would also mean that it would be untaxable land. So I just want to make sure that I'm imagining that you're about to cover that. I heard your segue, but just wanting to understand like what is the vision there and if we are continuing to be proactive about maintaining our business relationship with the state of Minnesota in our downtown district.
Yes, we are. And we've worked with the St. Paul Area Chamber of Commerce and the Downtown Alliance on those matters specifically. We have Cap Board representation and Director Goodman as well. I'll let chime in. I know that especially when Deed was potentially looking at a new lease, that was a large part of the conversation. And Deed has decided to retain their office space in downtown St. Paul, which is great. And I'll let Cap Board representatives or Director Goodman chime in as well to that specifically.
We have somebody from the CAP region, or not CAP region, the CAP board on.
Yes.
Yeah, we should have Paul and Peter if either wanted to chime in.
If you want to speak up, just please identify yourself and maybe your title.
You bet. This is Peter Musty. I'm the principal planner, zoning administrator for the Capital Area Architectural and Planning Board. And I can speak a little bit to that. The urban village vision for this is evolving in terms of the mix, with the office market questionable for the foreseeable future. It's really a question as to what new office buildings would go in on the site. We're retaining flexibility through the pre-development process, which would put in a really strong public realm, and then look at development, 2-3 years from now that would really be a diverse mix. There isn't a declaration right now of what the mix would be, but the preliminary plans might be 2 or 3 office buildings right along Rice Street. I don't know if that would be, it would need to be complementary to what the state has on campus. If it was even, I can't speak for the Department of Administration or their plans. They're developing a strategic plan at this point. And so long range plans for the state is certainly as evolving as the market is for downtown. But I think that's, I guess, what I can say at this point. It's certainly evolving, but it's a ways off where we would see any actual development proposals come in.
This is Paul Mandel, Exec Sec for the CAP Board. We do not envision any state-owned offices for sure on the site. It would be any office development would be spec office or private.
Thank you. Commissioner Bremo.
Thanks for the answers to those questions, and it definitely sounds like it's a work in process. I'm just really excited about this particular site, and I know that compared to Hillcrest and the Bridge site and and Allianz, which have gotten kind of more attention, this one I think is going to shift into the spotlight. And I really view this, there's kind of 2 things I think about this. One is that it's really your entrance to Rice Street. And that's really kind of building up to where we're heading, when you're entering the north end. And so it seems that it's been underdeveloped. The Sears definitely had its heyday during, probably the 70s and 80s, and when there was just that kind of destination mall and fields of parking was the way to go. But there's definitely huge opportunities here, and I'm excited about that. And especially because I think that the Capitol in some ways behaves like a stadium it's busy when it's busy, and then it's really quiet when it's not busy. And so it's really something to stabilize the area in a year-round basis, I think would be very helpful, because otherwise it's just busy during session. And then, it's hard for little restaurants or shops to maintain when folks go home after session. So I just think this is an incredibly important development, even though, as you said earlier, Ms. McMahon, what an incredible time for the city of St. Paul to have so many development opportunities. This just doesn't happen. And so I'm going to kind of take this on as something I want to really be a champion for, even though it's not in my ward. But I think what happens here directly impacts Ward 5. So I appreciate that information.
And this is Paul Mandel again. I would note there are approximately 7,500 employees on the Capitol campus on a normal basis. Clearly, the public is not there in the numbers that they are during session, but there are and it'll depend on how we return hybrid office spaces, et cetera. But the campus has about 7,500 employees on a regular basis.
Thank you. Any other question? I would echo Councilmember Brenmel's thoughts. This is just an amazing opportunity, like many of them, and it's just exciting to see this picture of what it could be integrated into the great existing neighborhoods surrounding it. So, all right, Ms. McMahon, do you want to continue?
Sure, and definitely appreciate, to your points, this is an incredible opportunity, and we have a lot of incredible opportunities, we're very fortunate in that respect for the city. Next slide, please, Holly. So just to note sort of where we are on the process for this one, Commissioner Brenmon, as you noted, it's maybe a little earlier in the process, but as it's ramping up, for folks to know that the next steps are really for community outreach and input on the proposal, and also for specific design and planning details for immediate neighbors. So considerations include things like improving safe access and crossing of Marion and Rice Street, access issues for the hotel, long-range mobility, parking solutions for the state workforce, and increasing commercial viability along Rice Street. So the site ownership, Seritage Growth Properties, it's a real estate investment trust that has inherited several dozen former Sears sites throughout the U.S. They've hired S9 out of New York City as the site architect, who have now teamed with local leads Kimley Horn to lead entitlements and engineering. So Kimley Horn is working closely with both city and CAP board staff and focusing heavily on public engagement. And that first phase is kicking off right now. CAP staff and Kimley Horn are working closely with district councils because there are several that border the area in their efforts. Next slide, please. River's Edge. This is the former site of the Ramsey County West and Adult Detention Center and West Publishing. The county completed deconstruction of the buildings in 2018 and owns the parcel. It's the last developable site on the downtown St. Paul riverfront. The county has selected AECom as master developer for the site, and they're currently in negotiations with them for purchase and a development agreement. Next slide, please. The county's goals, you can see here, are really to catalyze that 4.9 acres of private development to create 9 acres of new riverfront public realm and a direct connection to the riverfront. Next slide, please. And Boys Totem Town, this is the last of the sites I've got on the list here. So for background, this is a 72-acre property in the Battle Creek neighborhood. It was operated as a juvenile detention facility from 1913 until that facility closed in 2019. And during this COVID pandemic, the building has really been retained as a temporary respite housing option for unsheltered residents. Ramsey County and the city have begun working in conjunction on discussions of what future community engagement, what that process would look like for the site and what it would consist of. There's a neighborhood group, the Boys Totem Town Land Preservation Group, working with Lower Failing Creek that commissioned a cultural and architectural assessment from the 109 group, and that was completed in February of this year. And the next steps, city and community working together on community engagement with the county to likely to begin planning for the site in 2022. And those were all of the slides I have. As I noted before, there's a lot of project partners and owners and subject matter experts on the line for people's questions on any of them.
Great. Thank you very much, Ms. McMahon. Do we have any questions? Council members first or comments? Well, I will say, first of all, I think one of the exciting things here is on these sites is just the variety of statuses that they're all in. There are different parts along the way from Highland Bridge, which is, going full steam ahead of being developed, to Midway, to Hillcrest and others. And I think it's an exciting thing, and the type of development that we want, and the public-private partnerships on some of these large-scale sites that can make it great for everybody. And I'm excited to watch these as each site transitions into the next stage. And I know that this council and commission, as well as all the staff, that I bet there's 50 to 100 staff online right now, are excited to work with our private partners as we move this forward to better St. Paul. So it's a really exciting opportunity. Commissioner Naker, or Councilmember Naker.
Thanks, Chair Tolbert. I wanted to echo that. I'm struck by how unique each of the projects is, and how much care and time and attention our staff and other partners like the Downtown Alliance, the Chamber, the Port Authority put into helping developers get their projects done and make sure that they move along the way and that they benefit the communities that they're in. I think one of our core strengths in St. Paul, being a small town, big city, is that we can actually take the time to work individually with developers and with neighborhoods to make sure that projects advance and that they serve everyone's needs. So I just really appreciate all the effort that staff put in every day to make that happen.
Thank you. And Councilmember Talon, before I do that, I will say, I think I called it the Ford site. I'm trying to get that name out of my lexicon. It's Highland Bridge now, but I suspect it'll be in many people's minds, it'll be both for a while. Councilmember Talon.
Thank you, Chair Tolbert. I just want to say that, when we look at the facts, when we look at the evidence and the presentation that we see today, St. Paul is prime for development. We're ready for business. We want to work with developers. We want to work on projects that works for the community. I know that last week we've had a vote on one of the development, and folks has reached out to me through phones and email, and saying that our actions on the council may deter some developer from coming to develop in St. Paul. That St. Paul is not friendly for developer. But if you look at what Melanie has presented today, and with the staff and our partners, we're ready to go. And I'm just so excited that after this pandemic, we're running 100 miles per hour. And if you're out there, you want to develop, St. Paul is the place, and we have great partners here. And we're ready to make your project come true and make your dream come true. So thank you for that.
Commissioner, Councilmember Jalali.
Thank you. I am also just struck by the opportunity and just the sheer range of developments all in one place. I'm very involved with the Snelling Midway site, but then when you zoom out and really look citywide at the combined impact and potential, I find it remarkable. And just am thinking about, as an open thought and process with PED and our partners in the administration, whether and how we can be able to create something like a plan or consensus with our council colleagues on whether and how the American Rescue Plan and forthcoming federal dollars, and kind of building off of the conversation with Congresswoman McCollum last week about partners at HUD. There is, I think, a need for an intentional plan to leverage federal resource in a way that we haven't had, to actually make affordability at really deep levels available on these sites. We can't actually do that by ourselves as a city at the scale that we could with federal help. And it's sounding like we're turning a corner, but I just think as we look at the outlook, to not connect those dots or express that we should try to would be a big miss. And I think that we have to balance that the market exists, the market produces housing, the market is producing housing, as we've seen at previous HRA presentations, at mostly 60% AMI as the very deepest affordability all by itself, and then the rest is all market rate and above. And so I believe our role in this is to build in some intentional organizing of our partners and resource on the way to look at how we can improve affordability across all of the sites. That's something I have a really strong interest in. I know other folks would be game for that. So just want to offer that as a thought as we have our partners on the call today.
Thank you. Councilmember Yang.
Thank you. I have a question for Melanie. Do you know what affordability level the housing units at River's Edge will be? Because when I last had a briefing with folks in the county about that, that wasn't figured out yet.
As far as I'm aware, that is still unknown, but I will turn it over to our partners from the county and let them give more detail.
Thank you.
Is Ms. Collins?
Yes, I am here. Bear with me. I have a head cold. So this is Carrie, I assure you. Carrie Collins, Director of Community and Economic Development from Ramsey County. Pleased to be here. We do not know the AMI levels yet, as our focus at this time is ensuring that the public realm, or that bridge that goes down to Shepherd, that we can prove feasibility, financial feasibility to make that foundation work. We are committed to work with the City of St. Paul around this concept of a affordable housing trust fund, as the developer has committed to somewhere between 5 and 10 million set aside for an affordable housing trust fund. That could mean housing on site, off site, or opportunities along the full housing continuum to include, equity building initiatives. That has yet to be defined as we work through the project, but we can make a commitment to the City of St. Paul that we will be doing so in partnership with your housing staff. And Director Goodman and I have begun conversations with Kayla Schuckman as well to talk about how we work shoulder to shoulder in terms of affordable housing on River's Edge.
Thank you. That's really helpful info. I know we, as many of us council members, we talk a lot about the need for a 30% AMI housing in St. Paul, but that's really because there is a deep need for that. And so I've already shared that to the folks who I met with recently about this, and wanted to really put that out there that for me personally, I would really love to see, a vision around creating 30% AMI housing on River's Edge.
Thank you. Commissioner Prince?
Thank you, Chair Tolbert. To Commissioner Tao's point earlier, I think that what we saw last week when we voted about the project on Lexington is that the community really wants to be involved in shaping the development that happens in St. Paul. And I think that it's a good object lesson for all of us that we make sure that as developers get involved, that they reach out to the neighborhoods that they want to develop in, that they build relationships. And I think we have a really good example of that with Ryan Companies. When Ryan was selected, they came into that where there had been some neighborhood opposition, and they immediately held a series of meetings, and they involved the neighborhood over a period of time to have a voice and input in the project. I cannot stress that enough. And to that point, I do want to say that I am concerned about the community process that we have conducted for the Hillcrest project. The Eastside Freedom Library's Housing Justice Program has been getting very involved in bringing the community together to talk about the vision at Hillcrest. So as we move forward on this, I think it would be a really good idea for us to do some, again, thoughtful community outreach and relationship building with people who may not have been involved early on, who may be viewed as coming late to the table, but really have a lot of love and investment in their community that they would like to see reflected in that project. I do have a question on all of these developments. Are we at, I think my main concern is with River's Edge, how much we are still planning on developing Class A office space there, and whether we are considering the impact of COVID and whether or not those Class A office spaces will be needed downtown.
Scott?
Thank you. This is Carrie Collins. I'll defer to our product manager, Josh Olson.
Olson.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Tobler, Councilmember Prince. You know, I think it's safe to say, and you heard it with
Could you identify yourself?
I'm sorry, Josh Olson, Deputy Director within the county's Economic Development Department.
Thank you.
I would say I think you saw a little bit in this related to the Sears project, in that, you know, the broader office market is still fluid, and it's still taking shape in terms of how it will respond in a post COVID environment. I will say that from our, if I'm going to speak for the developer, AECOM in this particular instance, they would continue to say that they are very bullish on office. Downtown is still an attractive place for offices to be. I'm getting feedback. And the site has unparalleled access, visibility, and location. So I think it has all the makings of being a great office location. I would also say that AECOM has kind of continued to say that that there is, enhanced building, what happens inside buildings. A new project can provide a really great way to respond, new air filtration systems, well building standards, LEED certified. These are things that the marketplace has been asking for a while, and new Class A office space could very easily respond to that in this case. We still have a lot to work to do with AECOM. That's true. We are still evaluating. I mean, we had initially envisioned 2 towers coming out in that first phase of development, one of them being a hotel. We've seen rather quickly that hotel is a hard place to start the project with. So I think we're continuing to be fluid in our attempt to make this a truly exciting mixed-use development that incorporates all of the sides, office, residential, hospitality, just something that truly makes the place with enhanced vitality and vibrancy. So yeah, I think more to come. But if AECOM was here, they would continue to say they still believe strongly that office has a strong place on this project, because this is an unparalleled piece of property in the marketplace, and we're excited because St. Paul has that piece. Downtown St. Paul has that property. When I say exciting in a broad sense, regionally unparalleled. There isn't another downtown riverfront location like this one.
Thanks, Josh. It's good to know that that it's as you say, that it's really fluid, and that you're going to be making sure we don't get ahead of ourselves there. I guess the other question I have, and maybe today's meeting is its own answer, but I'm just curious on the River's Edge project in particular, where that is very much a county project, how we are coordinating with, I know our planners have been involved in it, and I'm just wondering how our development teams overall are coordinating on that site.
Mrs. McMahon or Mr. Rolls?
Sure, I can just chime in broadly, obviously, right? Wanting to, as Ms. Collins had said, wanting to work shoulder to shoulder with the county on Boys Totem Town, on really throughout the city, knowing that in large part, that's what will help make these sites successful, is that we are in communication and we are standing shoulder to shoulder, which is great. And Commissioner Prince, as you noted, there is on the planning level and within PED meetings for coordination on a lot of the technical aspects of it. There is the leadership level, Director Goodman, Ms. Collins. I know that the two of you communicate very frequently on this site amongst many others. So I'll just maybe note that. And if Director Goodman or Ms. Collins wanted to chime in as well, feel free.
No, thank you, Chair Tolbert and Councilmember Prince. No, that was a great synopsis, Melanie. And in terms of frequent meetings, we had some routine meetings with St. Paul PED, and then COVID struck and we took a pause, and now we're reconvening those meetings. And we also, on the AECOM side, have a new principal project manager. And so she's going to be introduced to the larger kind of what we'll call the regulatory team coming up here relatively shortly. So there's no doubt there's quite an array of kind of regulatory side of things that we need to work through, but we are working through that in partnership. I think what's unique about this is that we are two governmental entities, but that also means we're not dropping a plan set in front of St. Paul PED and asking that PED react. We are at the table together, forming this project together so that we're being kind of proactive in responding to concern around design standards in terms of, flow, view sheds, ensuring alignment with the comprehensive plan at the start so that there will be no surprises when plan sets are created and developed. So that's the beauty of this particular partnership. In that we're serving the same residents. This is a regional project and we want to do it the right way, and we want to do it with equity as well. So there's a significant amount of alignment. Again, we're still working through financial pieces. We're working through a master development agreement and what may be the terms of a kind of individual or singular purchase agreement. And that will help drive the pace as well. So I would anticipate a kind of a more frequent cadence with PED team coming up here relatively shortly as we have a new project manager entering the team.
Great, thanks, Ms. Collins.
Director Goodman, did you have anything to add to that?
Nothing to add. That type of coordination is happening on all of the projects, really. So, Riverside, Councilmember Prince was your specific concern there, but I'll say that our team and that and the development teams and the other departments really are communicating frequently and often and well, and I feel good about all of that coordination.
Great, thanks, Ms. Goodman.
Councilmember Yang, your hand is up. I don't know if you had more questions, and I apologize if you did, and I moved on to Ms. Prince. Oh, all right, that answers that. Councilmember Naker.
Thanks, Chair Tolbert. Along the lines of commercial development, I think it's really important, as Council President Brenmoen alluded to earlier, that we be attracting new companies from outside of St. Paul to come here and open up shop and create jobs in our community and expand our tax base. And rather than just shuffling the pieces around on the chessboard by moving companies from one part of the city to another, for example, or even one part of the metro to another, since we're all in this together. So I'm curious I know this is a little bit further down the road, but we're talking about commercial office space. What efforts are happening, again, in partnership between the city and the county, Greater MSP, the Chamber of the Port, others, to attract new jobs to St. Paul? And as a corollary question, is there anything that you think makes us particularly competitive in attracting those jobs, or on the other hand, things that we could be improving on to make ourselves more attractive?
I'll take that one, or I'll start anyway. I'll tell you, Councilmember, thank you, and thank you, Chair Tolbert and Commissioner. One of the things that I was interested in when I got here was what's the ecosystem for business attention, retention, attraction, expansion. I was fortunate to come from a city where we had like that was something that we really excelled at. We had a really tight core group of the chamber and the city and the alliance, and we had like a dog and pony show that we kind of had a well-oiled machine. And so we're really working together well on that here. We have a group that I'm meeting with today, which is all of who you mentioned. It's Greater MSP, it's support, it's the chamber, it's us, and we've been kind of honing that. We have Mary Rick in our department who's wonderful, and each of the organizations have their people and their teams, but we're working to really kind of bolster partnership in each of our roles. And when a prospect enters from anywhere, what's the process, so we don't ever drop balls. And so we have like a very clear, wherever the entry point is, this is your job, this is your job, this is your job, and we kind of have a routine. So I'll tell you, I'm excited about that. It's feeling good, and we have a strong team here. We're just honing our process. As far as what we have that attracts companies, we have so many things, but I'll tell you that I mentioned this on a call Monday. This city is with the focus on equity and the fact that there are multiple modes of transportation you can get around here. We could do even a better job of that. But as cities go, like there's public transit, you can walk to a lot of places. It's not a huge geographic city. If you look at the things that just like the Amazon HQ2 as an example of like the things that companies look for, we have a lot of those, and we also are really close on a lot of those things. And I think we, more than any city in this country right now, maybe have, as mentioned, the opportunity for federal funding because our administration and our leadership's priorities are so well aligned with federal priorities. And we have a new mechanism in place to get funding from the EDA that we didn't have before, which we do have now. So I'm optimistic about and looking forward to doing more of this kind of selling St. Paul and trying to attract companies and businesses. I feel good about it, if that's helpful.
Sorry about that. I was on mute. Were there any other partners on the line that wanted to add anything, give a quick pitch, or and I know we have a substantial amount of people for all these projects online ready to answer questions, but if anybody feels anything needs to be added, our public or private partners online, just raise your hand. With that being said, I will say, to echo what my colleague said, is early on in my council career, when the Ford site was still the Ford site, and we were doing research, and those buildings that Ms. McMahon had up were still up. I remember doing quite a bit of research at cities across the country for redevelopment, large infill sites, and the thing that was abundantly clear to me is how unique the ability to develop a larger scale site within an already built out city is. And I think that's what particularly is stunning to me, is that we have so many great infill sites that are fairly large in terms of their acreage. And I think that's pretty exciting. And we talked about it quite a bit as we went through the Ford development and the master development agreement that we all passed back in the end of 2019 with Ryan Companies, that is leading the way, is that the Ford site really is going to be the first one to lead to the 21st century development that we want, and the 21st century partnership that St. Paul wants with our developer community. And it's going to help lead the way for the rest of these sites, whether it's Midway, Hillcrest, the Sears site, Boys Totem Town, Riverview. And I will say, I have a list on a master list that I keep of the major developments that, at least in my mind, opportunities right now. And it's much larger than the sites that were presented here. These are kind of the ones that are the furthest along, as well as the largest so far. But I think it's a great opportunity. The other thing I will add that we learned when we did our research on the Ford site is, from the public sector standpoint, having alignment, partnership, and good communication between the city, the county, the neighborhoods, and the state, or capital group or cap region, depending on that, especially in a city like, in an area like the Twin Cities, is essential. And that's what we can do. We obviously need our private partners too, but that's what we can do. And I will say we do a really good job of that. And I think that's evidenced by how many partners are on the line and the constant communications that happen. I think the thing that, once these sites are all redeveloped and built out, and we all can explore it, I think the biggest problem in St. Paul is going to be which site is the most exciting to live at, and the different views that they have, whether it's at Highland Bridge, where you're on the banks of the Mississippi River, the Sears site, where you have the beautiful Capitol, the beautiful cathedral, as well as downtown St. Paul. You know, and I can go through all of them, but just thinking about all those opportunities of where people want to live, and based on the crazy real estate market in St. Paul that continues to this day, you know, I think it's proof that people want to live in St. Paul, people want to work in St. Paul, people want to, you know, once COVID's over, more so, but people will want to visit St. Paul quite a bit. But a lot of exciting opportunities here, and I think we all, as we spoke, look forward to working with our public and private partners to make these designs come into a reality. So, anything else that people have to add, or anyone want to speak up? If not, thank you, Ms. McMahon. I think for any people watching on the line that are interested in these developments, I think you've seen some of the people that you can get in touch with as initially, and of course, the council offices always have their lines open to help connect people with the proper city staff. So, thank you.
Great. Thanks, Ms. McMahon and Team St. Paul and Ramsey County. We appreciate the update. And I think that just having kind of ongoing check-in and conversation about where we're at with these projects, they're all at kind of different levels of progress. And so they're changing from a month-to-month basis. And I'm just very grateful for your leadership, Ms. McMahon, in herding cats, as we say, and making sure that all these things are moving along, and that we have our best foot forward in terms of presenting our city as a great place to develop, especially given these opportunities. So thank you very much for being here today. So we are going to switch gears to our item number 2 on our agenda, which was item number 1. So we'll move over to Councilmember Jalali, who is the city council representative, or who is the council representative on the Community First Public Safety group with the Citizens League. And I know that we will be getting a full report from the Citizens League in the first week of May, I believe, but we had been hoping for a check-in from Ms. Jalali, but unfortunately the meetings happened at the exact same time as our OR committee meetings. So we had a little reprieve here this week, and we're looking forward to an update. So the floor is yours, Ms. Jalali.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. Just taking a second to get up and running. I have some slides, and then Holly said she could do some screen sharing. Thank you so much. And keeping it there is great too, because then I can see the slides that are next and work through how to move this. Great. Alrighty. Well, thanks everybody. I guess I'll start by saying the moment I think that we're in, and then I'd like to speak to what my intention is with this presentation. This is an abrupt change of tone from what we've just been hearing, because all of our work happens all at the same time on the council, just like how all of our constituents experience everything happening to them all at the same time. We lead multi-issue lives. We are full and complete humans. And as a community today, we're also actually in a tremendous amount of pain. We are going through the Chauvin trials while also now receiving word of what's going to happen next with the prosecution of yet another person killed by police in our community. We're getting updates on multiple fronts hitting at multiple points. And this moment is extremely hard. So my heart is heavy, as I know all of ours are this week, as we mourn yet another Black man killed by police. We stand with the family of Dante Wright and the community of Brooklyn Center in seeking justice and freedom from police violence. And I've been scheduled for weeks with Holly to give this update on this process so far with the Citizens League Commission on alternatives to 911. And just several days ago, I was at the latest meeting with commissioners as they were discussing how traffic enforcement and other lower priority demands could get dealt with differently in our city through non-police responses and alternative responses. And yet, as we wind through those Chauvin trials, and I also appear before you today, over the weekend, the status quo of policing has claimed another life. I think that before we commence all this presentation and the work, it's important to acknowledge Dante Wright was stopped because of white supremacy manifested through public policy. Dante was driving with expired plates, which is something thousands of other Minnesotans do every day. He was driving with an air freshener hanging from his rear view, which is a small item that under the law can and does get used by police to further stop and harass Black people. He was stopped under these legal premises and killed. And now our communities are once again reliving the trauma of last summer while also living the trauma of this one. Under curfew, on lockdown, getting tear gassed, hit and beaten by cops at protests and patrolled by the National Guard. So I think we can all agree that the cost of the status quo is far too high. It was too high when George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Dante Wright, and too many others before them were killed. It has been too high in the outcry, the response, the unrest, the governmental coordination, the human, psychological, and financial costs of well over a year of civil unrest now. And as council members, we can't directly reform all of the laws that govern these situations, but our city government does have one unique power we can do, which is in addition to pushing for those things with our partners, we absolutely can and must reduce the number of ways our residents face unnecessary interactions with police. This work has been happening already in St. Paul for months, but our charge now becomes overwhelmingly more urgent. And I said yes to this work and this commission because I believe it can literally save lives. And I know we wouldn't all be doing all our jobs if we didn't think that too. And we wouldn't have supported our resolution and advanced in this process if we didn't think that too. So having made those acknowledgements, my purpose today is to share with you all some high-level updates of the commission process so far. I hope that it's clear this is far from a final report. This commission has met for dozens and dozens and dozens of hours. I haven't got to see you all on Wednesday mornings because I've been there. And so please know much more detail will be shared back to this committee, including a final report in the coming weeks. But we just have not gotten to hear as a full body what's going on since it began convening. So I simply want to get the chance to do what I would consider a reminder of some things you already know, some insights on what it's been like, emerging questions and themes, and then lay out some opportunities to get engaged in the final weeks and what's next. So if you don't mind, Holly, going to the first slide of commission overview and scope. This mayoral commission was announced by Mayor Carter in November of 2020, and it's been meeting since mid-December 2020 until now. It wraps in May 2021. The next slide is just a reminder about the commission overview and scope. There are 48 members appointed by the mayor, and I've been asked to serve as the council liaison. The idea is to bring together community members with wide-ranging experiences to explore how the city can build on its current strategy. It has been meeting through a facilitated process by the Citizens League, examining ideas for alternative response models to priority 4s and 5. Our co-chairs, Akua Ellis and John Marshall, with Kate Semino and Amanda Kunjbahari as project leads, who have all been tremendously helpful to work with. As I go to the next slide, which is just all of the commission members, I am sorry for the tiny font. Really, this is just meant to show that our commission members are diverse and contain a wide range of experiences, contain a wide range of sectors, contain clear leaders across the community, from law enforcement to the religious and faith communities, to organized labor, to coalitions of community leaders who work on community first public safety in their lives as district council heads, as activists and organizers in the movement for Black Lives. And then we also have leaders in education, leaders in immigrant communities, leaders in the financial community. So this is really, I think, the power of this commission is the expertise that sits upon it. And I also want to lift up a clear and strong value that has been brought up throughout, which is that we need to continue expanding this commission and conversations like this to folks most impacted historically and presently by not just disinvestment and the corresponding outcomes in public safety that is experienced by that, like higher levels of crime and gun violence, but also higher rates of exposure to over-policing, to police violence itself, and to kind of and the fallout of our failed public safety response. So that is a part of what is, you're looking at a slide of 48 names in like tiny Calibri font, but when I come to these meetings and see those faces, I see people who have a lifelong connection to this work and are giving up hundreds of hours of their time for our city. I just want to take a moment to acknowledge that. The overview and scope on the next slide, I'm just clarifying this or revisiting it because when we talk about community first public safety, personally, that topic for me brings up 6 million emotions and ideas. And I think we all have that because our community and everyone in it need safety. It is a basic life need. And so to narrow down what the Citizens League Commission is aimed at is supposed to do, the charges of us as commissioners are to develop alternative first response options to priority 4 and 5 calls for service, recommend approaches for ongoing community involvement in our community first public safety framework as a city, consider creating a city staffed office essentially to facilitate and drive this work, and then make recommendations based on these findings and conclusions. As a reminder, if you go to the next slide, what are priority 4 and 5 calls? I have a couple of slides on this. Ramsey County Emergency Comm Center came and presented to our commission several times, but reminders of where that is related to 1, 2, and 3. So 4s and 5s include crimes that occurred over 20 minutes ago or quality of life calls and administrative activities. And more specifically, in the next slide, you'll see default priority 4 or 5 situation types that we are looking at include persons in crisis or need, certain situations, theft, burglary, damage, illegal activities, noise, disturbances, animals, traffic, parking, accidents, administrative and follow-up outreaches, and proactive outreach. These are the 4s and 5s. These make up roughly half of all calls put into 911. When you actually dig into what some of these calls entail, part of the challenge I believe the commission is taking up and that exists in the world is that there could be situations that get called in that could be a 4 but are actually a 3. There could be situations that didn't need to get called in at all but get called in because of people's socialization to call the police for everything. There are situations that encompass multiple. It comes back to just the human complexity of what we're talking about. So as we look at a commission at these priorities, there has been a rightful, I think, pushback and focus and sort of category for continued emphasis from community members that there may be situations that encompass a 3 and a 4, but should get a treatment like a 4 response considering all circumstances. That's some of the nuance I want to offer because it's a part of the point of what I think we all want, which is a humane, effective, effective in all terms, in terms of response, treatment, financial and public dollar spent response. So what progress have we made so far? What have we been doing all this time? The next slide talks about just the range of presentations and information that we've been asked to consider. The first few bullets on here will really point to just the wealth of information that we've already gotten and presentations already given from the existing system. Presentations from the Emergency Communication Center, our own St. Paul Police Department, Ramsey County Mental Health, mobile crisis teams, the Community Outreach and Stabilization Unit, or sometimes that's written as COAST, East Metro Crisis Alliance, St. Paul Fire BLS. Tremendous amount of presentation given to what are police in our community doing now as they get these calls, how does dispatch work, what are some of the nuances and complexities with as this type of call comes in, how it gets dealt with, who is on the other line answering the phones, what type of human discretion is going into calls coming in, everything as is and how we've built it as is. I think that's important to understand because that is sort of level setting for how we then make recommendations. It is very clear from our time spent on the commission so far, folks have a lot of ideas about how to divert and reduce the load on the existing system while also getting a better sense for the strain on the system as we have it. The Minneapolis Office of Violence Prevention has also presented to our commission, and Sasha Cotton, who leads that office across the river, is a commission member herself. I think this is notable in that we have a neighboring community where there is an existing, I believe now close to $5 million institution, started out something like $1 or $3 million. Small, mighty institution within the city who is stewarding this work in a neighboring community. I think that, I don't get the sense that folks from our council or from our St. Paul Commission want to simply copy paste what another community is doing. However, there's a lot of precedent for this work, not just locally, but in other places around the country. And I personally really value another community's existing Office of Violence Prevention being able to share some of the lessons learned, because in this work, that's what it is. You fail and you learn things, and you hold your relationships with the community and entrust as you can, and you keep trying. So that has been an important part of the presentations to date. We have talked so much around this council table on how to support folks through domestic abuse. we are seeing through the pandemic, as many of us have acknowledged, rates of higher domestic abuse and domestic violence through the pressures and the constraints of having to be in quarantine and not being able to actually risk your shelter in a pandemic with an abusive partner. We received a presentation from leading multi-jurisdictional partners who are addressing this work in our community. That's really important to understand as we talk about how folks in a range of situations are seeking 911 for help. And additionally, I think St. Paul Fire BLS unit made it on the slides a couple times. That was just a tired mistake. But also, yes, of course, St. Paul Fire is among the greatest hits of emergency responders. Sorry about that. Presentation. This other last piece is that community partners who support individuals directly impacted by police violence and who are a part of supporting local protest movements against police violence have also come and been able to speak. There has been a really strong sentiment that we need far more of this type of feedback and input in the commission. I share that, and I also want to acknowledge that they made time in probably the most difficult time of their work to be able to come and help educate us. And I encourage all of us to continue seeking out places to seek their input. Minnesota Freedom Fund, Families Supporting Families Against Police Violence, folks who are right now, as we speak, bailing out protesters against highly questionable and suppressive curfews, folks who are at press conferences with the relatives of people who are mourning the loss of their father, the loss of their son, absolutely devastating work. We all have things in our job that break our hearts. I cannot imagine what it's like to be doing that work right now in levels of trauma. I think it's important that gets reflected in the commission. The additional support in the next slide is a really important and key partner that's been helping our commission, the Harvard Kennedy School Government Performance Lab. So this is a leading national institution. It's Harvard. It's a lot of researchers of color, actually, who have decided to take policy seriously and actually find the answers in evidence and data to the most challenging equity problems in our communities. So they are providing best practices research and surveying capacity to the commission on some of the key topics. For example, as we look at shaping whether we should create something like an Office of Violence Prevention or Neighborhood Safety, they can then survey the commission in detail about rate the priorities of area you think such an institution should be focused on. Please rank and order priorities. What are other things that you think are important, partners that you think the city should involve if they pursue this? And so this is really important, I think, so that you get not just that discussion level amongst the commission of us talking around the table and in subcommittees, but really formal positions that emerge if we are all asked the same set of questions. I think that's been a valuable layer of the work. Integrating research into successful or emerging models around the country, like CAHOOTS and other offices of violence prevention. So a lot of precedent exists for the type of work that St. Paul is trying to do and already doing around the country. CAHOOTS is a acronym that I have seen more times in the last 6 months than I ever have in my whole life, because it's brought up as a popular model. I'm sure many of you are familiar by now in Oregon, where non-police community responders can be referred to through dispatch process and arrive at the scene of a mental health crisis. I'll talk about the town halls in a second, but as we go to our community with these questions, the top situation or emerging top situation that we see demand around for alternative response is mental health crises. CAHOOTS and other models like that are things we can look to see what we need to learn. Harvard Kennedy School is one of the partners helping us get a grasp for those, best practices. So additionally, we've had, in addition to the representation on the commission, the discussions we're having within ourselves facilitated by the commission and our partners, we have had a series of town halls that are underway and happening even as we speak today. So series 1 was March 16th and 20th. Approximately 30 folks came to that. We are still doing those virtually, as with everything else, trying really hard to engage folks in the pandemic. The next one actually is tonight, and then there will be an upcoming one on the 17th. And at the next slide, it shows some framing questions that we use to open up conversation. And some of you, I'm sure all of you will react that you've seen these questions a million times, because these are the things keeping us up at night as counselors. These are the things that our these are the questions our community is answering when they reach out to our offices about carjackings and gun violence and domestic abuse and just scary things. When you think about public safety, what about your neighborhood makes you feel safe? What about your neighborhood makes you feel less safe? And then if you had a magic wand, what would you like to see for on-call responses to situations that are not urgent or violent but need attention? For example, noise complaint, welfare check. Young person is on there, but I don't know why young person itself would be. That might just be like a weird notes typo. Maybe perhaps that means like young person in crisis, not sure. Anyway, so these are all the types of questions we've used to just invite a discussion. And then there is a lot that we're getting back in these town halls. And I also think, we need to continue and have significantly even more engagement. But from what we've had so far, some central themes that emerge include that people feel the most safe when they have a deep connection to people and organizations in their neighborhoods. That concept that was affirmed in our city resolution that we voted on and advanced in November of a strong social and civic infrastructure of community organizations and resources, libraries, rec centers, grassroots organizations, community partners, your neighborhood networks. That's when people feel the most safe. And then also that police presence in neighborhoods, especially if combined with over-policing or harmful or inappropriate responses to situations, made them feel less safe. We have a lot of variation in the input around, there's lots of folks who uphold the obvious expectation that, police in our communities are expected to have good and trusting relationships. If police are around, it's important that they know the community. None of those discussions are new to our council or to our community, but they are getting reflected in the town halls. So I want to add some of that to this. But there's a lot to be discussed yet, and we are trying to, as a commission, corral kind of broad input from the community to then also tie it to the actual specific recommendations that we are developing about what we should be doing differently. And I think what's important to also note, and it's hard to summarize in a slide because it's so situational and there's different scenarios that get listed. But when we ask these questions to our community, what happens is folks are naturally pointing to situations where they felt unsure about what to do and then saying, but it would be great if XYZ could have been done. There's a person who is homeless in the Midway and is a regular common character. A lot of us know her now. She's constantly in need of support. We know a lot of folks through just word of mouth and relationships who actually works with her as a caseworker. We also know in terms of her rights and laws and the privacy, what is not allowed or not okay to do as we try to figure out how to help this person. That is the type of thing people think of when you ask them what we should do. They think of that situation in their life where they say, how could we help that person better, but also uphold their rights and make sure that everyone continues to be safe. And I think that this type of activation in the town halls is useful because people have ideas and we are trying to not only corral the values, themes, and priorities, but then also lift from specific ideas. People suggest, what if there could be this standing resource for someone like her? And so we're capturing all that too. I just kind of over explained in one example because it was hard to type all that out on one slide. So the next steps and recommendations. So this is what's coming in the next month. Again, it's actually a copy of the first slide because that is the goal of the commission. But I'm highlighting really like, what are the nuggets? What are the findings? What's the goal in this process? Alternative first response options, 2, 4s, and 5s. Ongoing community involvement structures. For a few years, we've talked as a council about things like the creation of a People's Cabinet for Public Safety, which goes back to when Jason Soul was at our city as a Community First Public Safety Director, and a community coalition has been pushing for structure like that to be an ongoing advisory, but also power sharing board in a way that would be different than what we've done. That's hard to figure out. We should still go after that idea. Consideration of a city staffed office. So all of these things are what we're talking about and arriving to recommendations on. I want to also lift up a process that is going on toward these recommendations that I have personally found very powerful, and that is underpinning what's on the slide here, which is that we have also been working to design from a user standpoint, not just like what the response should be, but our goals for the response. So for example, if a priority 4 call is called in and then someone, whatever the new thing is, right, is sent out to deal with that call. We have been working through an exercise that says, how do we want the user to feel? What help do we want them to get? How should they get treated? What are pitfalls that have been lethal in the past we want to avoid? And just having a frank discussion of all those aspects. And then on the workforce side, if we're having a new kind of responder come out, what skills, trainings, qualifications, and mindsets do we want them to have? What experiences, values, and attitudes are inherent to doing that role well? What might be challenges in responding to situations like that? And we're doing this for traffic enforcement, administrative calls, welfare checks, disorderly conduct. There's some really nebulous categories. I think disorderly conduct is one of them as an example that are kind of like racial bias traps. You know, here's somebody doing something disorderly. Well, what does that mean? Is that Black people being loud and getting the cops called on them? Is that a Hmong family having a big barbecue with like lots of the relatives and having the cops called because someone doesn't like that? So we have a lot of things to work on that are really just about community bias that is like everywhere and nefarious and needs to get addressed. But that seeps into these types of calls and then who comes there. So as we design, we're thinking about where is that happening? How can we like purge the poison of that from our response systems? How can we create something different? And how can we reduce all the demands on the system anyway? Because when you go out in the community and SPPD, at least in my ward, comes to our community meetings, they do answer questions, they do talk to folks, but they also have an overwhelming message of just call 911, and it like doesn't matter what it is. The message is just call 911. I understand that the police, as our city department, and our police force would have an obvious message that you should call them if you need help. That is also very much contributing to what they turn around and say are the demands on them to respond to calls for 911. We are trying to fix all of it. So I lift that up as an example of an exercise that the commission is doing right now, how it is trying to sharpen whatever the eventual recommendations will be on a human level, like really instead of going from macro to micro, to really think about if all of this comes true and we have a different response and that different responder comes out and you are the one depending on them to help you in maybe one of the tougher moments of your life, how do you want to be treated? What do they need to be successful? What's it going to take? So I just really lift that up because sometimes it just feels like big picture systems, budget, macro, and we lose the human side. We lose how it feels, what we need, who's going to be there. I'm almost done. The next slide is about the upcoming town halls. Remaining chances to engage, and that I really think our office can help in the final, our city offices can help in the final push is having folks come to the town halls that are left and really just getting the chance to be a part of this process and helping folks know these are there. Here's the flyer and the link to RSVP. Please attend these if you can and or share with your ward offices and networks. And then on the very last slide is just, or wait, not the last slide, second to last one is commission resources. I think that folks know and are able to contact Citizens League, but in case you have specific needs or questions, or if members of the public who are watching this presentation have needs or questions, I strongly recommend reaching out to these amazing partners. And then you can find like everything, like all of the presentations, lists of agendas, minutes with detailed comments of the discussion from all of the meetings so far. You can go to that website. The project page has all of it. The meetings have also been streamed and broadcast as we have them as an effort at transparency and for folks to follow along. So please know that that exists. We will get a big report as a council in the near future with even more homework for us. And I would say, as we think to what's ahead, that I believe, and I'm sure folks feel the same, that this is one phase of the engagement, and then we'll have some time before our budget phase, and then we'll be going into the budget cycle in the fall. And I think that there will likely be even more engagement needed around how to shape this well, and that we have to just keep up the conversation in our communities, and that as offices, we have the convening power to do that we both can support this commission process, and we also don't have to wait for someone else to do it. Like, we can all start having these types of discussions and structures in our wards. And I think I've learned some things from going through this process that we could replicate, and you all know and have relationships in the communities you represent and can do that as well. So short version, yes, more engagement in addition to this. So that's everything I have for today. I tried to not make it a nothing burger, but also not prematurely sharing stuff as we're still forming it out and the process is playing out. I hope this has been a good reminder of what is already underway that you knew, some insights into the types of things we're trying to grapple with, and then a little bit about what you can expect in the future. But with that, I yield for questions and or comments. Oh God, okay. People did move their heads, but for a second it looked like it was frozen and I had the moment of panic. Like, did I log off that entire presentation and just been offline? It was like frozen, and then Rebecca's head moved and I was like, okay, thank God.
We all just left and went for bagels. So I will jump in and just thank you so much for being our council representative on the Community First Public Safety Work Group. This is our task force. This I mean, it's clearly, I remember at one point you're telling me that it was just so much information coming in before real discussion started. But given just how complex the subject matter is, sometimes it's really important to do that level setting. And I know that you were instrumental in helping people be patient with the process so that we could have conversations where everyone had the same information in front of them. And I will just say, this really, for me, it's really helpful to hear your perspective and to hear the summary and update as Citizens League Director Semino is coming around and visiting with council members and gauging our expectations and as well. So I feel like I'm getting information from her. I got this information from you, and then as you mentioned, we'll be hearing about a full report, I believe, on the 5th of May during this org committee time slot at 10 o'clock. To hear what the final report is. So I just really thank you for your presentation, and I think thoughtful and poignant connection to our world today, what's happening around us, and why this conversation simply can't wait. And as I've said so many times, we need a plan in order to be able to shift our resources to where we're headed. And we can talk about it until we're blue in the face, but until we have a plan in front of us, it's really hard to make the case for why we're moving funds to one place or the other. And so I'm really grateful that this is teeing up here in April, which will give us time to put our values behind our planning and behind our work here. So thank you.
Thanks. I think I see Councilman Naker's hand is up.
Thanks, Councilmember Jalali, through the council president. I'll move my head a lot just to make sure you know we're not frozen. I really, really appreciate this presentation. I can't thank you enough for your leadership on this and for being our ambassador and representative on this task force. I can't tell you how grateful I've been this week in particular that we already have this work underway and that we don't have to talk about doing something, think about doing something, we're doing something, and that's huge. It's really hard, you know me, I want to ask all of the detailed questions, and I'm going to hold back because I know this is not the final presentation and recommendations are coming. I just wanted to get your sort of crystal ball sense, do you think there will be recommendations forthcoming that are implementable in this coming year, and yes, we'll have budget allocations associated, and I know there's lots of long-term work, but there's actually short-term immediate actions that we can take, because I'm very interested in knowing what those are.
So it's my understanding that the commissioners and the commission leaders and the chairs believe our charge is to present recommendations that could be implemented in this budget cycle, and that is, in short answer, yes, that I have not heard anything to the contrary. There is, of course, then will need to be a discussion about how we shape that, how can you recommend something to a budget? Do you actually recommend the outlines of something with the intention that it goes into a budget, right? So like how fleshed out it will be, I think, is part of where the questions lie right now. But The short answer is I would be shocked if there was not a recommendation that could be acted on ASAP and for us to get up and running and be able to take it and move it from here. So I hope that I don't mean to be giving a mushy answer. I'm just trying to give an honest one that is still clear enough. I hope that makes sense. But I'll be pushing for that. So that's my intention, and I believe it's the intention of the commission as well.
Great. Thanks so much.
Yeah, of course. And for your million questions too, I'm happy to chat, or the actual partners at the organization there's so much detail in their heads. I don't know. It sort of melts my brain. So we're here for those too. Everyone's just absorbing. Any other thoughts, questions, or comments? I'm very happy to talk about this work. I've given up a lot of, I have not been able to talk about everything else with you on Wednesday mornings because this is what I've been working on. So I really welcome, I guess I'm just like, get involved with this now and don't be shy, because I just really feel like what I've learned in the city at 3 years is you just have to like brawl for the things that you care about. And that means like sticking yourself into processes even as they're midway, because there is an attempt to make this as useful for us as it can be. So, I mean, my advice to the rest of the council would be like, speak up now. And if you want, just start with me and talk to me. And we'll do everything we can. And I really appreciate your commitment and support of this. And I'm honored to get to serve our city in this way as our liaison. Oh, wait, I see Nelsie.
Yeah, thank you, Councilor Jalali. I really liked seeing the recommendations that you had on the slide and shared so far. I was wondering if you could talk about like some of the barriers that you and maybe other commissioners foresee in us being able to implement some of these later on. And I know there's like more to come as well.
Yeah, sorry, it cut out for me a little. Can you say that one more time, Councilor Yang? I'm sorry.
Yeah, what do you foresee being the large barriers moving forward when we actually get to the part of like implementation?
That's a good question. I think imagination and the barrier of we hold the status quo to a much lower standard than the standard of ideas that are new and have emerging evidence and could benefit really greatly if we are willing to just give them the chance to work. I think that we have taken steps to challenge that in our existing community safety strategy and the programs we are supporting. But I'm just thinking back to different sessions where we've gotten updates on those programs and are like asking rightful questions about them, but then, we don't ask the same of what's already going on, or we don't ask as much. So imagination and being willing to take risks, that's more like human values, political. I think the pandemic and the budgetary constraints and the efforts underway in general that we know and have seen have had a hard time getting up and running continue to be a challenge, and that it's going to be really important for us to think about how we move at the pace of the problem and also fight to overcome like the gap of resources and how we address those gaps. So I just think the pandemic makes everything harder, including all of our existing work. And so understanding how do we prioritize this as an investment to get out of this cycle, right? Like this is actually the thing that could affect and be a revenue saver, because we're trying to shift the burden from so many costly calls right now into a future response. I think that guiding framework is going to be valuable. So that I see those as barriers. I also see those as things that we're just going to knock down as we have to because our community needs this. But those would be my gut reactions. I actually feel silly I haven't thought about that deeply because I've just been so focused on like, what are we going to do? How do we shape good recommendations, right? But there will be challenges ahead. Those are some high level ones I foresee. I feel hopeful though that we can overcome them. Yeah, thank you for the question.
Yeah, thank you. We're very lucky to have you on the commission. So great job and keep up the great work. And I really appreciate the lived examples that you bring up based on like constituents that you have in your ward as well, and how you also bring them along in the systemic changes that we envision here.
Thank you. I appreciate y'all forgiving my absences for months at a time on Wednesday mornings. I see Councilwoman Prince.
Thank you, Ms. Jalali, for the presentation and for your commitment to this work. I really appreciate it. One thing I wanted to note that I was happy to hear about is that Sasha Cotton has both been on the committee and was able to present on her amazing work in Minneapolis on violence intervention and prevention. And it's my understanding that the program that she is using is the gun violence intervention program, which I know that this council has had a presentation on, I believe, about 2 years ago, that was very compelling. And we have heard really good things about it from around the country and from Sasha. And I know it's something that County Attorney John Choi believes would be a really good next step for us to enter into in terms of the dramatic ongoing increase in the presence of guns and gun violence and people who shouldn't have guns and in our community. The other thing I wanted to say is that I think the way, I understand what you're saying, that, police say call 911 when you need anything. But I think the other thing that we need to realize as a community is that over the last 40 years, and I know this council has talked about it, as the federal government got out of housing, as the federal government got out of mental health supports, as we've seen our aid to cities cut, local government aid, we've had to close rec centers, we've had to cut back on all kinds of programs that were creating alternatives and options and relationship building for people in the community. And as all those things have been cut back, the one number that everybody knows when they're in crisis is 911. I think that's the unfortunate thing that has evolved, is that our police are suddenly trying to fill in holes like the police athletic league. When I started my job as a council person and the rec centers had been closed at Eastview and Highwood Hills, the police athletic league was the only recreational option for kids in that Highwood neighborhood on Tuesdays, that they could play basketball with our police. I think police formed a mental health unit because there aren't enough mental health supports available publicly. So that's kind of the frame that I look at all this through, is that we all know that unsheltered homelessness is unacceptable and we need to fix it. But it definitely creates a lot of police calls. So I appreciate this work, and I appreciate that we have the opportunity to allow, through this process, police to be able to focus on the work that they're supposed to be doing. And so thank you for your work, and I look forward to the continued report outs on next steps.
Thank you. And that's all very well taken. And to your point, exactly, we have to give our constituents, our residents, something else that they can call. We have to create the thing that doesn't exist, and that's at the heart of this initiative. So that's just me essentially drawing out your point as I see it. I appreciate this discussion today, and really honored to be able to represent us, and also very here to be the advocate for us and for our community on this commission in the remaining time it has. So please keep in touch about it, and I'll do the same, and looking forward to shaping this with all of you in the next phase. Thanks.
Thank you so much. We are at the end of the items on our agenda with the old bucket. Is there anything else item that's still in front of us?
Council President, I have a couple of questions left.
Okay.
Yeah, for Councilmember Jalali. So some of the other things I wanted to ask you is, I was wondering if you can share about board participation in the commissions and also the different public engagement events, what that has looked like. Because, for me, like, not just with like events that I've seen like hosted through the city and just like as an organizer too, I often feel the people who we have showing up aren't always the people who are most impacted by the unjust systems that we live in. And so if you can share about that, that'd be great. My other question is, how can we also talk about anti-Blackness and anti-Asian hate crimes using this commission? And then the other thing I wanted to add as well is, what do you have a vision on like how we can continue having this commission exist, like even after we finish this work? Because the large issues that we face now is like, how do we stop, police officers from killing Black people, from killing people of color in our communities who, we've seen that like over and over. And so I wanted to get your thoughts about that as well.
Yep. To the first, I think, we do need to improve the representation at the different town halls. We also all have networks within our communities where we are able to support folks getting to them. And also we should go where community is at and like do engagement with them in that way. So I think it's with all things a mix between, let's create a forum or a series of forums and do our best to get inclusive representation there, but also let's go to other people's forums. Like, people in my ward organize their own meetings and I go to them. Partners across the community have their own town halls. We go to those. I believe all of that is just as valid as like a commission sponsored town hall, right? And so I think that our job as policymakers and sort of the frontline engagement arm of the community as elected officials is to use our power to keep those conversations going and help folks get to them. And also lean on the expertise of the commissioners, because a lot of groups and community members and individuals, they've been pondering these questions and finding solutions to them with very little resource and often less institutional support than recently for a long time. And so we don't have to spend another year kind of like doing town hall. It's like the expertise. I guess I'm not telling you this, but more that a message I've been pushing is like, expertise lives on the commission and we should activate the knowledge and experience of these commissioners as much as we can. So I have a lot of passion around addressing that, Councilmember Yang, and I am very open to figuring out how we keep improving that going forward, while not wanting to erase a lot of important perspective that is on the commission and is flowing into what we're trying to shape. So it's a both and. And then to the second point of how do we stop the anti-Blackness? How do we keep our Asian elders safe? How do we live in the hurt of the world we've created? This is just the hell that we are in. I don't know how else to say that. It is a disgusting reality that Black people are murdered by police, and then we have horrible civil unrest that is both rightful and then is worsened by disproportionate police response. We are seeing that the attacks on Asian community members, not just in Atlanta, but then more recently in St. Paul following that, they are emboldened by complacency. They're emboldened by the idea that that it is okay to treat people like that and then get excused by law enforcement at times for what they're doing. And I appreciate that St. Paul Police Department has come out taking a strong stance against those things. And I think that if we believe in community safety, this is the type of work we have to lean into to say, we can create it if we look at what makes people safe. And here's what those things are. Here's one set of recommendations that is concretely going to help us do that as a city. But we also all have to work on, it's like some of this is about change the world, change yourself. Like as a Asian American, but also non-Black person, I've had to spend a lifetime unpacking where do I have relative privilege because of my racial identity, even though I am also discriminated against for having like a Muslim sounding name and, experience mistreatment because I'm a woman. I mean, that's part of our work as human leaders. It's the idea of change the world by changing yourself. And I think that the broader cultural and racial issues, those can get addressed if we have the power. It doesn't have to be this way. So big questions and therefore big answers, but I also see a clear connection to this work. And we just have to succeed because what's happening right now is hurting everyone we care about. So thank you for that.
Did you have more, Ms. Yang?
No, I don't. Thank you so
Okay.
much.
Yep. Okay. Well, okay. Then your hand went back up. Okay, so just wrapping it up there, we do have the other item on our agenda, and this is just a housekeeping reminder to folks, but for our council meeting today, if people can find and use their headsets, it's easier for the closed captioning to hear exactly what we're saying when we're using our headsets. I know like by the end of a meeting, sometimes mine's really pinching and I'm over it, but that is a request for the closed captioning. And then also to the extent possible during our council meetings, if people can use their cameras. We've had some comments about just not, just the level of transparency if we're not on camera. So encouraging folks to do that. I realize it's not always possible. We're in our homes and there's kids and pets and life happening. Hi, Donnie. So I'm not singling anyone out, but just there has been some input that cameras on would be preferable. Any other items to come before us before we are adjourned today? All right. We've covered a lot of ground and we have got a lot of ground yet still to cover today. So thank you very much and we will be adjourned.